good Easter Sunday with the family? Did you enjoy your lunch or your brunch or your dinner or your supper, whatever you call it? Who enjoyed? It always comes back to food for me. Who enjoyed it? Yeah. Well, we had a fun day here at Stone. We had 3 different campuses represented, and we actually had a whole weekend of it. But I want to show you some pictures. This was our Good Friday service that was at our Yakima campus, and the next picture is just going to show you how packed out it was. If you weren't there, it was packed. Just an amazing time to remember what Jesus did on the cross. Just a fun time together. And then our Lower Valley campus launched. And so this was kind of the first service there. As you can see, it looks very similar to what we have here. But it was just an amazing day. And our Lower Valley campus on Easter Sunday had 565 people who came that day. And what was even cooler than that, the cooler number to me than that was 17 people gave their life to Jesus on Easter Sunday at our Lower Valley campus. So kind of a cool deal there. And what was cool is you just hear these stories of people going, man, we've been praying for a place like this. And what's funny is I'm like, I've heard that story before because that's exactly what happened here. And it just shows that God's moving. No matter where you put a church, people are hungry for Jesus. And that's all that really matters. So, but also we don't want to forget Stone Selah. So Stone Selah, we packed the place out as well. Look at the handsome guy up there. His wife dressed him. So, here at Stone Selah, we had 545 people who came on Easter Sunday, which is the second largest day that we've had as a church, period. But the better number for us was we had 15 people raise their hand for salvation as well. So it was a cool day, and you're like, Matt, why do you care so much about numbers? I do not care about numbers. What I care about is I care about people. And people are represented in numbers. Because what I know is that with every person who was here, there's also a story that's attached to their life. And that story matters to God. And those people who raise their hand, their eternity is changed forever. And so what an amazing thing. This is why we plant churches. This is why we do what we do. And we just absolutely love it. So again, can we just give it up for Stone Church and you guys for what happened on Easter Sunday? Well, we are starting a new series called Faith Over Fear, where we're going to be walking through the book of Daniel. If you're new with us here at Stone, one of the things that we do is we have chosen to go book by book, chapter by chapter, through the entire Bible. What we believe in this is we believe that it's important for us to hear everything that God's word has to say. Now, here's the thing. With that comes some difficulties because there's times you have to address things that are difficult to address. Our culture and all those things, there's some things that are a little bit more difficult to address, but they need to be addressed because if God wrote it, he wanted us to preach it. The other part of that, though, is that sometimes there's some things that are a little different. Daniel will be in that little different world because the way that Daniel is written in 2 different parts. And so kind of want to give you a little context on the book of Daniel before we jump in to chapter 1 today. But what it is that Daniel was written by a guy by the name of Daniel. And so Daniel wrote Daniel. The book itself was written after the Babylonian regime, after everything was done and over with, and they were conquered. This is when the captivity, when all that's done, this is when Daniel is writing this story. We're going to see a span of about 70 to 80 years is what we're kind of looking at with this book. The first half of the book is going to be historical. It's going to be what happened. This is what Daniel went through. This is what he walked through. The other half of it's going to be what's called apocalyptic themed. What that means is end times. Now, if you're like me, when I first heard about end times, it freaked me out. It scared me. I never read Revelation, never read it because I was too afraid of what it said because I wasn't sure. Also, I would think of, when I heard apocalyptic, I would think movies. And I would think nothing ever good comes from an apocalyptic movie that is good for me as just a regular person because I'm not the hero in the movie. So that's how I saw things. But as I've grown, as I've matured and read and studied, actually what we find in end times themes and topics is that it's an encouragement to us as believers. And here's why it's an encouragement. Because Jesus is with us all the way through. And these are promises that he's given us that we can prepare for. It's like going, hey, you're going to go into a football game and we're going to tell you every single play that they're going to run. You're going to have really great success if you do that. And so this is what this is, and it's going to help us to be able to prepare, but also to know that God is with us even when it seems like gloom and doom. And so that's what kind of the second half of Daniel looks like. Today we're going to jump into chapter 1. In chapter 1, we're going to meet Daniel, but we're also going to meet 3 of his friends. And here's what I will say to you today. I think this message is for everybody. I think there's parts of this message that we can all grab and use. But really, I see a lot of young faces in here, and I really want you young people to listen to what is being said. And here's why. Because Daniel and the guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these are friends of Daniel. They are all about 15 years old at this point. So where this starts is for 15, and it's more special for me because I got a 15-year-old. And so this is something that's important for us to kind of pay attention and watch what happens as the story unfolds. And I love how this story starts because it really gives us a glimpse of what is about to happen when we talk about faith over fear. Because I believe that this book, or this series, could not be more properly titled than Faith over Fear, because we're going to see that over and over and over again throughout the book of Daniel. So you ready to jump into God's word and read it today? All right, here we go. It says this, Daniel 1, verses 1 through 7. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands, which means that God allowed for this to happen. Along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered that person, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. 4 young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language. So this guy is to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. Matt, what did you just read? Let me break it down. This is a great way to start this book, because what Daniel is doing is he's laying out the foundation of what and where he is. So what has happened is we just heard that Jehoiakim is besieged. God allowed for this to happen, and this new empire comes in. The former empire was the Assyrians. Now this new empire is the Babylonians. And I've heard Babylonian. I've heard it in movies and all those things. I've heard this quite often. And the way that this would work is that they would take over little towns, little cities, little kingdoms, and they would force them to be a part of the new regime, the new empire of Babylon or Assyria. Now, these things, the way that the Assyrians and the Babylonians did things was different. The way that they would force them to conform to the new way of doing things, the way that they would force them to do things differently, was 2 different ends of the spectrum. So the Assyrians, the way that they would do it, what was said is that they would do it through fear and violence. So much so that it is mentioned, it is literally talked about, that what they would do is that they would skin people alive. You're going to conform to what we're going to do, and we're going to skin people alive so that you know you don't want to go against us. They would also take hooks, and they would put them through this part of the nose right here. This was before it was cool. Now apparently it's cool, so you can do this now. But this was before that, and they would do this, and they would put it through. And then what they would do is, like fish on a line, is that they would put them together. They would fish line them together through these hooks in the nose. The Assyrians were some bad, bad people. It worked for a while, and then it didn't. Now, the Babylonians, they're on the other side of the spectrum. Now, for me, I don't know, has anybody here have you ever been to Disneyland? Disney World, Disneyland? I got to go a few years ago. I was not fortunate enough to go when I was a kid, but my wife was, and my wife told me all about how this place was so cool and so amazing. And so we took our kids to Disneyland, and when we got to Disneyland, I'm going to tell you what, like I remember getting on the plane, and I was so excited to get on the like to go to Disneyland. Like they would ask me, like they didn't even ask me. I just told like the stewardess, I'm like, hey, guess where I'm going? Disneyland. Like I was so excited, and they're like, she's like, I didn't ask. I'm like, Disneyland. Like I was so excited. Like it was so much fun. Like I was so excited, and it is better than what she could have ever told me. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. Right from the get, everything is amazing. Like you walk by certain places and it smells like the place it's supposed to be. And you walk into a different part that's not very far away, and that smell's gone and a new smell comes. It smells so nice in Disneyland. Also, the princesses are nice. Like they have no clue who I am, but they make me feel like I am part of their world. But what's even better is the bad guys. The bad guys. Captain Hook was there. And he was nice. This place is amazing. The food's amazing. Everything about Disneyland was amazing. I love it. And guess where we want to go on vacation next? Disneyland. Because Disneyland has learned something. Disneyland has learned that if we can make it the most amazing place on earth, that people will want to come and spend their money here. If we can make it to where people want to come back, they will have so much fun and want to spend their money here. The same thing is true for Babylon. You see, Babylon, they were on the opposite end. They didn't use violence and fear. What they used was the city itself. See, the city itself was gated up, and then there was a river that would run by it, kind of to treat it as a moat. And then what they would do is you would go into the gates. You go into the city, and then there would be hanging baskets that would provide shade. It was beautiful. It smelled nice. Everything about it was amazing. And what they were doing is what King Nebuchadnezzar understood was if we can get people here, they're never going to want to leave. And what we're going to do with these people is we need to get them to conform. And so what he tried to do was he wanted to get people part of the service. And so he started with young, handsome, healthy men. And at that point, I feel like I'm just literally describing myself. Like, I feel like that's what I'm doing right now. But they want young, healthy, fit, good-looking men to come in. And here's what they would do. They would use them, but they needed them to conform to the Babylonian way. They had to change things up, and there's 3 ways that they did that. 3 different tactics that they would use that we just read about. Number 1 is that they would use physical isolation. And what that means is this, is that for many of these people, it would be about a 900-mile, some as far as a 900-mile journey in the desert from their hometown to Babylon. So there would be 900 miles on foot that they're walking, and they are there, and now they get to Babylon where there's water, and there's hanging baskets, and there's shade, and there's food, all the food that I could have. What they knew is, if we can just get them away from their family, then we can isolate them to conform to how we do things. And here's the thing, is that when I look at that, I kind of understand that a little bit, because if I can just get my kids away from me for a little bit, they can fall into any different thing that is thrown at them. One thing that I see quite often is when kids go to college, that is when they explore different things. When they get away from the family, it's kind of physical isolation, and this is what's happening here. Number 2 is that they would also have mental indoctrination. And so what we see is that official, he taught them the language and the culture. He gave them food, the king's food. Like, I remember I went to Las Vegas a few years ago, and we bought this, like, 24-hour buffet, but you could go to, like, all the different, like, whatever casino, basically, you walk by, you could go in, and here's the truth, is that this is a fat guy's dream, and I was dreaming. I was so happy. I had crepes. I had like, sweet crepes. I had savory crepes. It was amazing. I don't remember much about Las Vegas, but I do remember the buffet. And this is what they're having here, is that they have the same thing that the king is eating is what they are getting. This is what we're seeing here. And then the third thing was this, and this is the part that I want us to really hone in on today. To have them conform to the way that the Babylonians did things was they used identity alteration. You see, what's funny is I've heard all my life, I know who Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are. I've heard that even before I went to church. But I did not know that those were names that were given to them that changed who they were. You see, what Nebuchadnezzar was doing was he was trying to change who God said they were to fit who he said they were. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like what's going on in our world today. I want to show you this graphic because I just want to show you the difference that a name can make. You see the Hebrew name on the left there, the Hebrew name, that is the God-given name that they received from birth. Daniel was his name, and what that meant is God is my judge. But when he got there, his name was changed to Belshazzar, which made Balak protect. Balak was a god of Babylon. You see how just a slight change, but it changes who they are. Hananiah, the Lord is gracious, was changed to Shadrach, which is command of Aku, which is another god. Mishael, who is what God is, was changed to Meshach, is who is what Aku is. Just a little change. Can I tell you something? Our culture, our world will throw little changes, but enough little changes changes the total trajectory of a life. And last was Azariah. The Lord has helped, was changed to Abednego. And that's a servant of Nebo, which is another god. You see, here's what we're seeing here. Is that in this first part of Daniel is helping us see this big issue that we don't fully get right away if we don't pay attention. And that is this, is the world will always try and change who God says you are. But God will always be with you through that. And that's what we're going to see as we walk through the rest of Daniel. You see, here's the thing, is that Daniel's setting the stage. He's setting the stage for when this whole thing goes down, when Babylon is coming after me. I believe that if I just stick with God, if I just do it his way, that he will make sure that I see it through. He will make sure that my identity is found in him and nothing else. But the problem is that I think and believe that this is the truth for us today. It might be different, the circumstances that they went through, but the theme is the same of today. When I look on our social media, when I look at our world, when I look at, and I'm talking to everybody here, when I look at TikTok influencers, when I look at social media influencers, when I look at the world, they tell us one thing, and this is what they tell us. Be you. Do what you want to do. You are who you want to be. And for some of us, here's the truth, is that we take it and we run with it. The problem is that that's not what God wants. And we're actually going to see in this second part, verses 8 through 21, the first part of what we see Daniel standing up for. And I love this. It says this in verse 8, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself that way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king, which would be 3 years, to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal, hear me, none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. If I had, which I do, a top 10 inspiring passages of the Bible, this would be one of them right here. Again, I want to throw this out there. They're 15 years old. I have a 15-year-old. There's a little thing called peer pressure that throws so many things at our kids. And what do we see these 4 young boys do? The king says, this is the food you're going to eat. This is the food that you're going to eat. And here's what I love, is that it says that God gave favor and compassion and put that on the official for Daniel. Now, here's the thing. We also see that he understood one thing, that if he gets caught and it doesn't work out, it could be his head, that he could die. And I know we're sitting here, it's food. It's just food. You see, Daniel stood up for what he was taught. Daniel stood up for what he knew God wanted from him. And what do we see when they do that? When they see that they do that, we see that they're stronger and healthier and better, smarter than all the other young men. I'm so thankful that God gave Daniel some wisdom, say, just give us 10 days. And they start eating vegetables, and they start getting stronger and smarter, and it makes me go, I might want to get back on keto. No, I don't even know why I lied in church. I'm not doing that. But man, it's just food. It's just food. This is the problem with the way that we think sometimes. It's just food. Let me switch it up. It's just one drink. It's just one time. He says he wants to marry me. It's just one time. It's just fill in the blank. And what was happening here was what the empire wanted them to conform by being willing to cut corners or to choose to do things because it's just, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else has that social media. Everybody else has a boyfriend. Now I'm talking to the younger people in the room. Everybody else has this. Can I tell you something? I really want you to hear me today, and I want you to hear this very clear. The world will throw things at you to hurt you. God will never do that. But we're always chasing the identity of what the world has to offer. I've lived that world. I've lived that. And guess what I got? I got the prizes that you get from what the world throws at you. I drank. I had those relationships. I chose to do some things. And here's what I got. I got more lost and more confused. I got more hurt. And it wasn't until I found Jesus that I really realized one thing of who I am supposed to be. And I'm supposed to be a child of God. We come to church and we just play the game. Check the box. But the reality is that there's no checking the box anymore because we don't know what's next. We don't know if tomorrow's going to come because the Bible's clear. Tomorrow is not promised. And when we play silly games, we get silly prizes. And what we see here from these young men is that they chose to stand up for what they believed in. Here's the fun part, is it doesn't say this, but the reality is that they too could have lost their lives for not eating the king's food. They were willing to give their life to follow what God had asked them to do. When was the last time we were willing to give our life to follow what he's asked us to do? The reality is that these young men, they honored God. They honored him. They honored him so much that even though everybody else, they're so far away from their family, they're so far away, they have done so many, everybody else is doing it, they chose to be faithful and honor God. And what I've found throughout time is this, is that if I honor God, to show and glorify himself, what God will do is sometimes he'll honor us as well in what we're doing. What do I mean by that? They eat vegetables. I don't know about you, but vegetables, I have a hate-hate relationship. But vegetables and water, and they're stronger, healthier, smarter. They're the best of the best. Because God honored them because of their faithfulness. God honored them because they said, which is the hardest word in the dictionary to say, no. Hey, you want to go to the party? There's going to be some. No. Why don't you want to go to the party? You don't have to do any of that stuff. Famous last words. There's something strong about the word no. There's something strong about people being willing to stand on the word of God and choose him over what makes me feel good. The problem is that our world tells us, you want to feel good? Do it your way. You want to feel good? Go do that. Oh, you want to feel good? Don't do it God's way because that's no fun. I'd rather have no fun and live the way that God wants me to live than ever have to live that world again. And I had all the fun. I don't say it to boast, but I got high as a kite. I got drunk as I can get. And it brought me nothing. But when I gave my life to Jesus, it brought me everything. And here's the truth is that I don't know where we got this twisted, but that somehow giving our life to Jesus just means everything goes away and it's easy again. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It's just not true. Here's the reality is it makes it easier to walk through difficult times when I have Jesus. Here's the truth is that there are great times with Jesus. There are great times, but reality is the enemy wants nothing more than for you to not be who God wants you to be. And so he's going to fight against that. Can I tell you the truth this week? It's the sickest I've been in a while. I second-guessed myself numerous times on this message. because I believe that the enemy wanted nothing more than me not to say the things that God wanted me to say. Which brings me to this last point. And this is for everybody under the age of 18. I want you to sit up. I want you to keep your eyes peeled on me. It's also for you too, you adults. But it wasn't until 21 that I gave my life to Jesus. And here's the thing, is that I missed out on 21 years. 21 years of knowing who Jesus really was in my life. Trying to find things to fill the holes in my heart in all kinds of different things that never satisfied until I met Jesus. And now, I want you to never have to live in that world. And so I'm going to tell you some things today. And this is what God deposited. This is the hardest part of this message today. Because I don't want to hurt feelings. But I just want to talk real to you for a little bit. First, grandmas and grandpas, moms and dads, can I say this? I'm pretty sure, it doesn't say this in here, but I'm pretty sure there's no possible way that these 15-year-old boys just figured this out on their own. My guess is that they had some godly moms and dads, some godly grandmas and grandpas who built them up and taught them how to be these young men who follow God with everything. Can we continue to do that? Now is the time more than ever for us to invest in our kids in their spiritual walk. Right now. I love that we have games and basketball and baseball and football. I love that we have dance, and I love that we have, and if we would just invest as much time as we're willing to invest in sports and dance and cheer into our kids in their spiritual life, I promise you, this world has no chance. That's for you guys. Now, the youngins. There's a world that's the easiest way is coming after you. It's special for me because I have a 15-year-old son. The world is coming because they don't want you to succeed. So what they're going to throw at you is they're going to throw at you fame and fortune, but they're also going to throw at you that you're not who God says you are. I'm not just talking about this gender thing that's going on right now. That's its own thing. What I'm talking about is who you are. The Bible is very clear that God took his time when he knit you together in your mom's womb. That he said, I want her to have these things. I want him to have that. I want her to be able to walk with confidence in the body that I gave her. The world's going to throw at you that you got to look different, you got to act different, you got to sound different. And that maybe God made a mistake. Can I tell you something? I know this from cover to cover. I know that it's very clear. God never makes a mistake. And he created you exactly how he wants you. But the problem is that we want to chase a little thing called peer pressure. We want to chase it. I want to be accepted. I want them to like me. I want him to like me. I want her to like me. That's no fun. It's not fun being a Christian. I don't like church. I'd rather go party. I'd rather go do, and here's what I'm going to tell you, because I've lived it, and I lived it to the fullest. You will never find who you are, because your identity is not found in who you are. Your identity is found in whose you are. And you are a child of the King. Chase it. Chase the world and watch what happens. I promise you. You're going to get the same thing that your parents got. Here's what I know. I see people nodding their head yes, because you lived it too. And if we could scream it from the mountaintop, we would tell you it's not worth it. it feels good in the moment. You're old. I remember when I got told that the first time, I wanted to punch him. I don't want our world to have control of our kids, but I also don't want my kids to have my faith. I want my kids to have their faith. I want my kids to know that it's not mom and dad who make the decisions when it comes to when I read my Bible, when I pray. I want it to be your decision. I want you to choose. I want you to say yes. I want you to worship. I don't want you to raise your hands and worship because I do. I want you to raise your hands and worship because he died for you. And now I'm talking to everybody. Because I know this. I know there's adults who are still trying to find out who you are. And your identity is not in what you think it is. You're not going to find it at the bottom of a bottle. You're not going to find it in the bottom of a relationship that you are just going, it's over. It's the same cycle. Because that part of your heart was never meant to be filled by somebody or someone. It was only meant to be filled by God. So now it's time to give up. Stop running. Stop running. Those are the words that I remember being told when I finally surrendered to Jesus. Stop running and start living. Because the most amazing thing happened when I gave my life to Jesus. Not only did my life change, but I started living. And I live now with purpose. And I live now knowing that I can mess up, but he still loves me. That I may not have it all together. I may not look the coolest. My wife tells me that quite often. But it doesn't matter because I'm loved by the King. And here's what I love the most about this, from what I've seen so far, is that these men, these young boys, had to conform to work in this service. That sounds like a slave. It isn't specifically slave, but that sounds like a slave. Like, I have to do it. I have to do it this way. I can't leave. I got to do your work. That sounds like a slave. And when I think of slaves, I think of chains. And this world wants to keep you chained up. Keep going back because we can keep you in chains. Keep going back. Keep doing the same thing. And what Jesus did on that cross that we celebrated last week, his risen body, it broke the chains and it brought freedom. And that's all I want for you today is freedom.